Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving deep into a topic that's maybe not the most exciting on the surface, but it's definitely important.
Yeah.
And it's something that can really make or break a company, especially when things get tough. We're talking about compliance and how it plays into crisis management.
hmm
So we're taking a look at a really fascinating episode from the new Compliance Officers Playbook podcast. It's called Crisis Management for Compliance Officers.
Okay.
And one of the things that really jumped out at me was
Yeah.
this idea that compliance officers are like the unsung heroes when a crisis hits. It's not always the CEO or the PR team that's really steering the ship.
Yeah, it's funny because when you think about it,
Yeah.
compliance officers are kind of like the calm in the storm,
All
right?
right.
They're the ones who have to stay level-headed.
They have to know all the rules.
Exactly.
Right.
They know the rules, they know the regulations, and they know how to keep the company from making a bad situation even worse.
So it's not just about knowing the rules, it's about knowing how to apply them
Absolutely. Under pressure.
when everything's on the line.
Yeah. It's like having a pilot who not only knows how to fly a plane,
Yeah.
but can also navigate a thunderstorm.
Right. Because anyone can fly when the skies are clear.
Exactly.
But it takes a special kind of skill to stay calm
Yeah.
and make the right decisions when things are going crazy.
Absolutely. And those decisions can have huge consequences for the company.
Well, so this podcast episode that we're looking at asks a really interesting question. How can compliance officers not just survive a crisis, but actually use it to make the company stronger? Because a lot of times when you're in a crisis, you're just trying to get through it.
Right. Yeah, just trying to survive.
Right. But this episode argues that a well-handled crisis can be an opportunity for growth.
It's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever heard this analogy,
Yeah.
but it's like a forest fire. It seems devastating at first, but it actually clears out the underbrush and allows new things to grow.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's a great analogy.
So, yeah, a crisis can be a really tough time, but it can also be a time for renewal and positive change.
So the first thing that really struck me in this episode was the idea that compliance officers are kind of like the unsung heroes of crisis management. We always think of the CEO or the PR team, but the compliance officer is working behind the scenes, making sure the company doesn't step on any legal landmines.
Yeah, they're the ones who are really in the trenches, making sure everything is done by the book.
Right, because one wrong move
Uh-huh.
could land them in even bigger trouble.
Exactly. And they have to be thinking about all the potential consequences of every decision.
So, like, if a company has a data breach,
Oh, yeah, a big one these days.
a compliance officer is going to be the one who understands,
Yeah.
all of the laws about data privacy and making sure people are notified.
Right. Think about GDPR, for example. That's a big one in Europe. There are strict rules about notifying individuals within 72 hours of a breach.
And the fines for noncompliance are...
Huge. We're talking millions.
Yeah, so it's not just about checking boxes on a checklist. It's about
Right.
making strategic decisions that could make or break the company.
Absolutely. They're the ones who are really protecting the company from disaster.
And it's not just about legal compliance either, right? I mean, they're also thinking about the ethical implications of every action.
That's a really important point.
Because it's not just about staying out of jail, it's about doing the right thing.
Right. It's about protecting the company's reputation and maintaining trust with customers.
Okay, so what are some of the specific things that a compliance officer might do in the middle of a crisis?
Well, the episode lays it out kind of like a step-by-step guide.
Oh, I love a good checklist.
Me too. So first things first,
Yeah.
they need to quickly assess the situation,
Okay.
figure out what's going on, how bad it is.
Get a handle on everything.
Exactly. And then they need to figure out the legal and regulatory implications.
So are there any laws that have been broken? Are there any specific reporting requirements?
Exactly. They're making sure that the company doesn't accidentally break any more rules while trying to fix the problem.
It's like putting out a fire with gasoline.
Yeah, you don't want to make things worse.
Right. So assess the situation,
Mhm.
and then what?
Then they need to coordinate with all the different departments.
Oh, yeah, because they can't do it alone.
No way. They need to make sure everyone's on the same page.
So they're working with legal, with PR, with operations, with everyone.
Exactly. They're like the conductor of an orchestra, making sure everyone is playing their part in harmony.
Okay, so assess, coordinate, and then I'm guessing there's a lot of paperwork involved.
Oh, yeah, you bet. Ensuring compliance with reporting requirements is a huge part of the job.
So they're filing reports, sending notifications, documenting everything.
Exactly. And remember, in a crisis, time is of the essence.
Oh, yeah, you've got deadlines.
Right. Those notifications need to go out accurately and on time.
Because missing a deadline could mean even bigger fines or penalties.
Yeah, you don't want to add insult to injury.
And it doesn't just end there, right? I mean, once the immediate crisis is over, there's still a lot of work to be done.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The post-crisis phase is just as important as the initial response.
So what does that involve?
Well, things like investigations, remedies. It's a long process.
Hold on, you said remedies. What does that actually mean in this context?
It means taking steps to fix the problem and prevent it from happening again.
Oh, okay, so it's not just about putting out the fire, it's about figuring out how to prevent another fire.
Exactly. It could involve things like compensating affected customers, upgrading systems, changing internal policies, whatever it takes to address the root cause of the crisis.
So it's really about learning from the experience.
Yeah, using it as an opportunity to improve and become more resilient.
That's a great point. So it's not just about surviving the crisis, it's about learning from it and making sure it doesn't happen again.
Right. And speaking of learning, this episode outlines 5 key phases of crisis management that compliance officers use to guide their actions.
Okay, I'm all ears.
The first one is immediate assessment and containment. This is where you hit the pause button, take a deep breath, and really figure out what's going on. Yeah. It's like a doctor doing triage. You need to assess the situation before you can start treatment.
So like in that data breach example, the compliance officer is working with the IT team to figure out how the breach happened, how much data was compromised, and how to stop it from spreading further.
Exactly. They're verifying security measures, assessing the damage, and making sure everyone understands the immediate steps to minimize further risk.
Got it. So contain the damage, assess the situation, and then what?
Well, then comes internal communication and coordination. You absolutely have to get everyone on the same page.
Oh yeah, and fast.
Right. Because in a crisis, information can easily get distorted.
Yeah, rumors start flying.
Right. So clear and accurate communication is crucial.
Okay, so the compliance officer is basically the central hub for information.
Exactly. Making sure that everyone from the legal team to the CEO knows exactly what's going on.
And they're the ones who understand all that complex legal and regulatory stuff. So they have to translate that into clear, actionable instructions for each department.
Exactly. It's like they're speaking 2 different languages.
Right. So they're explaining things like, hey, we have to notify the regulators within 24 hours, or we need to make sure we're handling customer data properly.
Exactly. It's all about knowing the rules of the game and making sure everyone plays by them.
Okay, so assess, communicate internally, and then what comes next?
Well, this is where the legal expertise really comes into play. The third step is all about regulatory and legal obligations.
Okay.
This is where that deep knowledge of compliance really shines.
So going back to our data breach example, let's say the company is dealing with customer data from Europe. The compliance officer knows that GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, mandates that individuals must be notified within 72 hours, right?
Right. And they're not just aware of the regulation, they're making sure the organization follows it to the letter.
Because if they don't,
Well, the consequences can be pretty severe.
yeah, like we talked about earlier.
We're talking about hefty fines, lawsuits, and reputational damage that can take years to recover from.
Ouch. So it's not just about doing the right thing ethically, it's about protecting the company from some serious financial and legal consequences.
Absolutely. And it's not a one-size-fits-all approach either.
Right, because every situation is different.
The compliance officer has to understand the specific laws and reporting requirements for each jurisdiction involved.
It's like being a legal and regulatory expert for the entire globe.
Yeah.
So we've been focusing on the internal stuff, but most crises also have a very public face.
Right, how it looks to the outside world.
How does the compliance officer handle that aspect?
Well, that's where the fourth step comes in, public relations and reputation management.
Okay.
The PR team might be crafting the message, but the compliance officer has a crucial role to play behind the scenes.
So they're making sure that everything the company says publicly is accurate and doesn't contradict any legal or regulatory requirements.
Exactly. They're the ones who can say, hold on, we can't promise that in a public statement because it could contradict the law, or we need to be careful how we phrase this so we don't expose ourselves to further legal liability.
So they're kind of like the guardrails, making sure the PR team doesn't accidentally steer the company off a cliff.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. They're protecting the company's reputation and making sure that everything they say is legally sound.
Okay. So assess, communicate internally, comply with regulations, manage public relations, and then what?
Well, then comes the final step, post-crisis review and remediation.
Okay.
This is where everyone takes a deep breath, gathers around and figures out what went well, what went wrong, and how to prevent a repeat performance.
So it's like a debrief after a mission.
Exactly. And the compliance officer plays a vital role in analyzing what caused the crisis, identifying any compliance gaps, and recommending changes to improve a company's response in the future.
So it's like taking your car in for a tune-up after a rough off-road adventure. You want to make sure everything is running smoothly before you hit the road again.
That's a great analogy. You want to be prepared for the next challenge.
Okay, so we've got our 5 steps. Assess, communicate internally, comply with regulations, manage public relations, and then review and improve. It's a pretty comprehensive approach, but I have to admit, it all sounds a bit intimidating, like you need a law degree to even understand it.
I hear you. But the good news is, the podcast episode also provides some really practical tools and resources that anyone can use to make crisis management more manageable.
Oh, that's good to hear. I'm all about practical solutions.
Me too. So the first tool they talk about is a crisis management playbook.
A playbook, like for a football team.
Exactly. Think of it as your go-to guide for what to do when what hits the fan.
Okay.
It outlines the chain of command, steps for containing the crisis, communication protocols, you name it. It's like having a cheat sheet for navigating chaos.
So instead of everyone running around in a panic, you've got a clear plan to follow. I like it.
Yeah, it takes the guesswork out of it.
Yeah.
And then the second tool they mention is an incident response plan, or IRP. This one's especially important for things like cybersecurity incidents.
So it's like a fire drill, but for cyber attacks. You practice what to do so that when a real incident happens, everyone knows their role and can spring into action quickly.
You got it. And having a well-rehearsed IRP can make a huge difference in how effectively you contain a security breach and limit the damage. It can save you a lot of headaches down the road.
That makes sense. So, playbook, incident response plan. What's next?
Well, this next one is something we can all relate to, even if we're not compliance officers. They call it regular drills and scenario planning.
Okay, what are we talking about here?
It's all about preparation and practice.
Okay.
Because even the best plan is useless if you don't know how to use it.
Right, you have to practice.
Exactly. So they're suggesting that companies actually run drills, like playing out different crisis scenarios. A data breach, a product recall, a major PR disaster.
So it's like those disaster movies, but with less explosions and more paperwork.
Yeah. But the idea is that by practicing these scenarios, everyone gets more comfortable with their role and the company's overall crisis response plan.
Right, because when the pressure is on, you don't want to be fumbling around trying to figure out what to do.
Exactly. You want to be able to react quickly and effectively.
It's like training for a marathon. You might not enjoy all those long runs, but come race day, you're glad you put in the work.
That's a great analogy. And then the last tool they talk about is legal and regulatory resources.
So you don't want to be scrambling to find a lawyer when the regulators are knocking at your door. You need to have those relationships in place beforehand, right?
Exactly. Whether it's an internal legal team or external experts, you need to have access to folks who can provide guidance on compliance requirements, especially when things are moving fast and the stakes are high.
So it's like having a lifeline. You hope you never have to use it, but you're sure glad it's there if you need it.
Yeah, and remember, staying up to date on the latest legal and regulatory developments is essential.
Oh, yeah, because things are constantly changing.
Absolutely. What might be compliant today could be outdated tomorrow.
So it's a constantly evolving landscape.
Right. And compliance officers need to be on top of it.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. But I think it's important to remember that all of this really boils down to one key idea. Preparation is everything.
That's it. You can't just wait for a crisis to happen.
Yeah.
You need to be proactive and have a plan in place.
And that's true for all of us, right? Whether we're facing a professional crisis or a personal challenge, having a plan, staying calm, and knowing where to turn for help can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. So how about we take a break here and come back to talk about how we can apply these principles to our own lives?
Yeah, that's a great idea. We'll be back in a bit to explore how we can all become a little bit more crisis-proof. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. So last time we were talking about how those compliance officers really step up during a crisis. And we left off with a really interesting question.
Yeah.
How can we use those same crisis management skills in our own lives?
Right, because let's face it.
Yeah.
Life doesn't always go according to plan.
No, it definitely doesn't. And it's not like we have our own little crisis management playbook sitting on our nightstand, you know.
Right, but I think those same principles can be really helpful when you're dealing with those unexpected personal emergencies.
Absolutely. So it's not about being like some kind of robot. you know?
Right.
It's more about having some tools that you can rely on when things get tough.
Exactly. It's about building that mental resilience so you can handle whatever life throws at you.
So how do we actually do that? Like, how do we build up that mental muscle?
Well, the podcast episode we're looking at talks about a couple of tools that I think have some really interesting personal applications.
Okay.
They talked about regular drills and scenario planning.
Oh, yeah, like those company-wide simulations they do where they act out like a data breach or something.
Exactly. It might seem a little over the top for a company,
Yeah.
but think about how you could apply that to your own life.
Yeah.
Imagine you're driving home late one night and you get a flat tire. What do?
Oh, man. I've been there. And let me tell you, it's not fun.
Not fun at all,
Uh-huh.
especially if you're not sure what to do.
Right. I mean, I think I know how to change a tire, but doing it on the side of the road in the dark,
Yeah,
it's a whole different story.
it is. But what if you had actually practiced changing a tire beforehand?
Okay, yeah. That's a good point. Like maybe in my driveway on a sunny day when I'm not stressed out.
Exactly. Just running through those steps a couple of times would make you so much more confident and prepared if you ever had to do it for real.
It's like muscle memory for emergencies. I love it.
Right. And it's not just for physical skills either. What if you lost your job unexpectedly? Have you thought about what steps you would take?
Oh, man.
It's not a fun thing to think about.
No, but it's probably a good idea to at least have some kind of plan, right?
Absolutely. Just having some idea of what you would do can make a huge difference in how you respond.
Yeah, just to know, like, okay, here are the steps I need to take.
Exactly. You don't want to be completely caught off guard.
Right. So, okay, regular drills and scenario planning for real life. What else did they talk about?
Well, they also talked about having access to legal and regulatory resources.
Okay, so that might sound really specific to compliance officers.
It does. But, we all operate within certain legal and regulatory frameworks, even if we don't realize it.
Oh, yeah, like taxes.
Exactly. Or understanding contracts. Those things can be really complicated.
They are, and I'm definitely not a lawyer.
Me neither.
Mm.
But having access to good information and advice can make a huge difference.
Yeah, like if you're ever facing a legal issue or you need to sign a contract.
Exactly. It's like having a map to navigate that legal landscape.
Okay, so where would someone even find these resources?
You'd be surprised. There are tons of resources out there, from government websites to free legal clinics to online communities where you can connect with people who have expertise in specific areas.
So even if you can't afford to hire a lawyer for every little thing,
Right.
you can still arm yourself with knowledge.
Exactly. It's about being proactive and informed, which can really empower you.
I like that. Okay, so regular drills and legal resources. I'm writing all this down.
Good. I'm glad it's helpful.
It is.
Yeah.
It's amazing how something that's designed for like corporate crisis management can be so relevant to our everyday lives.
It is. And, it all comes back to that idea we talked about earlier, building mental muscle.
Yeah.
We have to train our minds to be resilient, just like we train our bodies.
So what are some good mental workouts we can do to build up that resilience?
Well, I think managing stress is huge.
Okay.
We all experience stress, but it's how we manage it that really makes a difference.
So like finding healthy ways to cope, like exercise or spending time with loved ones or maybe even meditation.
Exactly. Whatever works for you.
Right, because what works for one person might not work for another.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of a positive mindset.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
It's easy to get sucked into negativity when things are tough.
It is, but, focusing on what we can control, looking for those silver linings,
Right.
trying to practice gratitude, those things really can make a difference.
They absolutely do. And remember self-care.
True. Yeah.
Making sure you're getting enough sleep, eating well, taking breaks when you need them.
It's easy to let those things slide when you're stressed, but they're so important.
They are. It's like making sure your phone is fully charged before you go on a long trip.
Right. You need to have that energy reserve.
Exactly. And finally, I think building a strong support network is key.
Oh, absolutely. Having people you can rely on, whether it's for emotional support, practical help, or just someone to listen to you vent, that can make a world of difference.
It's like having a team of cheerleaders in your corner, reminding you that you've got this.
So having that crisis management mindset isn't just about responding to emergencies. It's about approaching life with a certain level of preparedness and resilience.
I love that. It's about knowing that you have the tools and support to handle whatever comes your way.
Exactly. So as we head into the final part of this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought.
Okay.
What's one small step you can take today to start building your own personal crisis management toolkit?
It doesn't have to be anything drastic.
No.
It could be as simple as making a list of important contacts, taking a first aid class, or even just scheduling some time for self-care.
Right. It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe you'll even inspire someone else to start building their own resilience toolbox.
That's a great idea. So join us for part 3 as we wrap up our exploration of crisis management and uncover even more valuable insights. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our deep dive on crisis management. It's amazing how much of what we've talked about can be applied to everyday life.
Right. Like you don't have to be a compliance officer
Right.
to benefit from having a plan.
Exactly, because crises happen everywhere, in our personal lives,
Yeah.
at work, anywhere, really.
And, it's interesting. We often think about crisis management as reacting to something, something bad.
Yeah, like putting out fires.
Exactly. But this podcast episode that we're looking at really emphasizes the importance of being proactive.
Yeah, about having those systems in place before you need them.
Like, it's kind of like having a fire extinguisher in your kitchen, right?
Yeah.
You hope you never have to use it, but
Oh, yeah.
you're sure glad it's there if you need it.
And you don't want to wait till the fire starts to go looking for one.
Exactly.
So it made me think about that quote from the new Compliance Officers Playbook podcast. They said, crisis management is about being prepared, staying calm under pressure, and using your expertise to guide your organization through turbulent times.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It really sums it up right.
It really does. And it makes you realize that it's not just about having a plan, it's about having the confidence and the expertise to execute that plan.
Right? Like you need to know what to do and how to do it.
Exactly.
So how do we cultivate that kind of leadership? Even if we're not in a formal leadership position, how do we become those people who can stay calm and collected when everything's hitting the fan?
Well, I think it starts with knowing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding your strengths and weaknesses and what your triggers are.
Oh, yeah, like what makes you stressed out.
Exactly. And once you know yourself better, you can start to build up those mental muscles that help you stay calm and focused.
So like if you know that you tend to freeze up under pressure, you can practice things like deep breathing or visualization to help you stay grounded.
Exactly. And if you know that you tend to take on too much,
Oh, yeah.
you can start to learn how to delegate and set boundaries.
Right, delegate to other people because you can't do it all yourself. And I think it's important to remember that becoming an expert in anything takes time.
Yeah.
It takes practice. It takes making mistakes.
It's a process.
It is. And I think that's a good reminder for all of us that we're all constantly learning and growing.
It's a journey.
It is.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into crisis management, what's one thing our listeners can take away from this episode?
I think the biggest takeaway is that crisis management isn't just about reacting to bad things. It's about being prepared.
Yeah.
It's about having the right mindset. And it's about using those challenging experiences to learn and grow and come out stronger on the other side.
I like that. It's not about just surviving, it's about thriving.
It is. So no matter what challenges you're facing, whether it's at work or in your personal life, remember that you have the power to choose how you respond.
You do. You have the power to be proactive, to build your resilience, and to come out on top.
That's a great message to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.